Hey guys, I'm Cecilia Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out the description. That will lead you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server. You can join Sholab and Colab and do all that cool stuff, and showing will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, before getting into it, of course, I've seen the trailer for this quite a few times, I would say 3 or 4. And I've also already seen some YouTube thumbnails by the time I've seen this, and I've definitely seen more negative than positive, so at least so far, from my initial sort of scoping of this. I could be wrong, but I've just seen it, at least my feed was, of that. But I am here to try to review this movie as objectively as possible. So I decided to not check out any other reviews to, try to put me in a scope where I might see or, manipulate anything further than what I've already been witness to on YouTube and its thumbnails. I wanted to reach my own conclusion despite a feeling that I already kind of grasped by people's sort of initial inclination, shortly after this movie was even announced, which is like, the whole like, why is this still a series and why is this still going on, especially after the last one, when the last one wasn't even good, all things considered. And in this movie, but had me going back, and maybe need to rewatch the first 3 movies, is now I'm kind of curious, was Indiana Jones always in the acquisition of finding not just artifacts, but artifacts that contained bizarre powers to them? Was that always the caveat to all the Indiana Jones movies, like the first 3 included? I'm definitely gonna have to check out their first 3 again at some point, because the last 2 movies have, including this one with the previous one in that, it seems as if that is the case. Now, the only thing I can remember from the old Indiana Jones movie was the chalice, the cups. I remember the only thing about that movie was, like, if you chose incorrectly, like, grow old and die, like, instantly. So there seemed to be, at least in one of the 3 originals, some sort of mystical element to, like, the artifact that Indiana Jones was picking up. So that really had me thinking, like, was the previous movie that bad if, yeah, the concept was aliens? I mean, alien artifacts, whatever. I can kind of lean a little bit closer to be like, it's not even that crap, or that bad, or whatever. But I don't know. It seems additionally like that is the case here as well. Like, at least maybe I'm getting off on the escapades, but I'm just gonna say it now that the so-called Dial of Destiny allows the users to time travel. And I will explain that bit later on. But don't worry, the movie, we're gonna go through it in the order of the events that are within it. And again, we're gonna try to do it as objectively as possible. So the movie opens up, and we open on some footage where we're on this encampment of Nazis, and we see a young Indiana Jones, and I will say, I believe the CGI or whatever they used It's gotten pretty good, I think. Now maybe I'm being fooled, but because this isn't the only movie that uses this obvious like sort of de-aging sort of CGI tech. So yeah, it's not the first movie to use it, and it looks, again, as far as I can tell, looks decent enough from when I was watching it. Anyway, point is, he's already captured at this juncture, and they're getting ready to kill him by the noose. But Jones willingly wiggles his way out of it and escapes this burning building that he is currently in. Excuse me. So he does some maneuvers, gets in a car. Eventually, he ends up like on a motorcycle, like sort of car hopping and vehicle hopping in general, onto a moving train. Within it, he moves his way up towards like the front cart. It does so fairly easily, in fact. He's trying, I don't know if he's attempting to purposely rescue his friend or ally Baz, but he gets some help from him on the rooftops when one of them Nazis is trying to get him down. But Baz shoots the main bad guy, and they jump in the water. And after we see they jump into the water, after I believe Baz steals the artifact, or has the artifact in his possession, we cut to our current time frame. Here we see our old Indiana Jones waking up and hearing some music, and he's like, keep it down. And we see that he covers his old Flame's face on the refrigerator. And he goes back to work from his class. As he does in the previous movie, he teaches history or artifactual like lessons. Again, so it is keeping up from the previous movie, so it's saying that the previous movie is indeed canon, so and I'm guessing the other three are as well. So this isn't like some out of canon like type of movie or anything of that nature, which is why I'm trying to decipher whether or not the whole item things he picks up are all like these like things that have powers attached to them, if that was always the case. Because if that was always the case, then maybe reviewers have it wrong. And I know that's shocking for me to come across that revelation, but yeah, a lot of people have been complaining about, again, the types of artifacts that Indiana Jones has been picking up recently, and again, I too was included in that, in the whole alien thing, again, if that was the case in the previous three movies, I'm not sure why we would be complaining about it if it's an alien, but still an artifact. It still falls under that preview. And there still was a temple in that movie, so it still carries a lot of the previous pretenses from the previous three Indiana Jones movies. So again, I prompt the question, how much of the previous artifacts had powers attached to them, including this one? Anyway, so he goes to his question, and he has one student who seems to be well versed in the knowledge he's proposing for this future quiz that's going to be have all the stuff on it, and one of the students follows him in pursuit, and we see this one curious person following her, or spying, if you were. We learn that this young student is Baz's daughter or granddaughter. I'm not sure which. I'm gonna assume daughter. And her name is Helena, the one on the lower left of the poster, middle portion of it. So she has already inquisitioned her father's curiosity and this dial, or at least the half that Indiana Jones already possesses. However, the three, or two of them, I should say, as of currently, are quickly attacked by our intrepid spy person and her two goons. And as we quickly learn, she was not intending for people to get shot at, but rather just to get information. So things weren't going her way necessarily, but nonetheless, Helena escapes, and Jones in tow comes with. But she flees on the rooftops, and he sort of runs out and calls the cops, or at least attempts to. However, he's stopped and captured pretty quickly. Once he's in this crowd of people who are parading against something or other, Jones fights. He rallies them up and then fights off the guards, at least for a bit. And then a gun is fired, and so he runs to this police officer who is a bit of distance away. I'd probably say a corner and a half. So I'm not sure how much of that gunshot would have probably been heard by the policemen, considering all the other noise. The believability there is a little bit. Probably really iffy, if anything. But so he's kind of getting the sort of semi-ignore tactic going on. But the bad guys aren't having any of it and shoot him down. The police officer, that is. So, he runs off. And meanwhile, we get a little bit of a flashback at some point after this, after he gets away to this with Baz and the full dial and the concept of it, or at least just it in being full anyway. We cut to then Helena with the piece of the dial, like the quarter half of it, or the half of it, and she's ready to auction it off, because she's all about that money, 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 because capitalism, ain't it fun? But hey, she's playing the game, the capitalism game, that is. And we learn that the main Nazi is calling himself Smith. So that's what we'll call him for the purposes of this review. Anyway, so yeah, Jones and Helena escape. But Helena has her own other issues that are with this whole other guy who has interest in her, and he's this mob boss guy. I'm not really sure what their whole deal was, except him having the hots for her. And them sort of gunning them down for a bit, only to have him be no, don't shoot. Anyway, they bump into her sort of sidekick, our young companion of the movie. So again, playing on I'm gonna say it, the previous Indiana Jones trope of having a younger kid character, or a teen at the very most, sidekick with them. That being Ted. He's the lower left on the poster there with the hat on. Anyway, so he gets them a ride. And so they're in another car chase. And all the meanwhile, Helena's getting pulled into this other car, and there's all this stuff going on, and suffice it to say, despite all of this kerfuffle, Smith the Nazi gets his half of the dial from this process, kills the agent, the woman that I was talking to you that was scoping out the whole scene earlier, and so on and so forth. So, she along with Helena, that being, and Tim. She's like, we could probably do this. But, Jones like, I'm in, because I want the dial more so than anything else, because that would belong to the museum anyway, so I'm just trying to get back what was there. At any rate, he tags along, and they make their way to the docks with the new vehicle in tow. Helena does a little bit of a card trick, so she's showing off that she has some other stuff up her sleeve. And Jones talks about it's not just about believing in something, it's about how hard you believe in something, in the things that he has been through previously. So, he talks about on this boat ride to get the other piece. He talks about how his son, aka Shia LaBeouf from the previous film, had enlisted in a war to protest and died in the war. So this is like, I guess they couldn't get Shia LaBeouf back, and they also just, because he's doing his own thing or whatever, I guess, and they just didn't want him back or whatever the case may be. Anyway, they couldn't get him back for whatever reasons, and they're like, okay, so we have to write him out of the script. So they did this, where he enlisted and got killed in the war. So Jones talks about how if he could go back in time, because that's what the dial is already claimed to do, that he would go back and tell his son to not go to the war, and tell him about how that whole event caused him and his wife, or lady, whatever their current status is, to separate at that point, and indeed even be distraught. So the movie has some emotional weight to it, so there is even that much going for it. So again, I am struggling to currently see why, except maybe the time travel bit, but we'll get to that. And maybe some of the other stuff later on. But the earlier sections, I'm seeing pretty vintage Indiana Jones, at least from the initial first, third of the movie, I want to say, of this movie. Maybe second half, up to, the third end section is where things get a little bit wonky. If that's the criticism, because I haven't heard them yet. Anyway. So, yes. So they go deep diving to get the second half of the dial. And they go underwater. And they're underwater. And they mention eels, because eels, and then Helena mentions how they look like snakes. So for those who don't remember or don't know, Indiana Jones has a phobia of snakes. This has been documented since the first movie. So he kind of freaked out about that. He was trying to play it off like, no, they don't look like snakes. No. So yeah. Anyway, they're deep diving, and they get three little. They're told they got 3 minutes to look down there. But during their escapades in the water, Jones gets attacked by some eels, and he gets the treasure. But by the time they get there, or at least he gets the chest, another boat arrives on the scene. And this is definitely where I start having issues, because the Nazis just keep having to find their crew, somehow. This happens pretty consistently throughout the movie, and it gets pretty damn annoying, actually. So actually, if anything, I have more issues with the antagonist more so than our protagonist currently. Uh, because boy oh boy, do our antagonists somehow just keep knowing where our protagonists, our heroes are at all times, somehow, some way. I don't know. So yeah, they kill the guy, or at least drown him. Uh, and yeah, they're waiting, and they scoop up Indiana Jones and Helena with the artifact in question. Um, in this display, he's like, okay, reveal the information, to both of them, and Jones says no, so our big Nazi, Schmidt, kills this other guy, one of the other explorers, spelunkers, excuse me. Uh, so he offers up some money, so Helena's like, okay, I'll do it. Pretty simplistically. However, during her whole display, she sort of like starts reading it and goes over things in fine detail, and she's scoping out the entire room. And as she scopes out the entire room, going throughout the information relatively to a decent pace, she once scoops around back to Jones, shows that she has some dynamite. So he now knows that she has got a trick up her sleeve, and this is all a ploy. So she continues down her path, and she's right at the edge of like the end of like this puzzle sequence of like, or explaining it anyway. And she pulls the dynamite out and is attempting to light it. Jones helps her light the match, and so she tosses it and grabs the kid, Tim, and they both, the trio, run as it lights up and blows up, and they take the dial, or half of the dial, excuse me, and flee the scene. And so they burn, or Indiana Jones burns the circle tile clue thingamadug and finds a smaller dial thingamajig, which brings them to a map to Sicily, which it does the old vintage, spoiler alert, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, the Indiana Jones trope of showing the map and so they're playing, they're following the method of like how Indiana Jones would travel back in the old movie, so they're keeping up with the old times. So we see that when they arrive there, Tim does some pickpocketing on some kids that were like pointing at him and like, haha, whatever. So he gets a little side revenge and takes their money and gets some stuff for himself. However, again, the second time, the Nazis find the kid, again, somehow, not again, I'm not sure how, but they do. And so they steal Tim. And then Indiana Jones and Helena find that out pretty quickly and steal a wedding car to go to the temple directly, because he figures that they're going to figure out whether the temple is out from him. Tim, that is, the Nazis are. So they gotta beat the Nazis there. So as they're explaining their as they're exploring this temple, and as they're climbing, Jones is having a little bit of a rougher time being older, and explains how much he had, some roughness in his older adventures. That included being drinking the heart of I forget who it was, but yeah. So yeah, some pretty crazy stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, seems to follow suit. Yeah, I would be like, if I were in that situation, I'd probably be complaining a little bit too, if I were being honest, and remembering all of Indiana Jones's adventures. I'd be like, yeah, this is pretty shit right now. Anyways, they go into this small space where there are several large bugs in the vicinity, and Helena freaks out, and Jones in subsequent fashion freaks out, and guides them both out of there, and gets the large, massive bugs off of them. And I mean massive. These things are like, what the fuck size? So yeah, I could also understand them being freaked out by those things, because I'm pretty sure most people would be freaked out by bugs of that caliber and size. Because yes, I know I did say what I said earlier, but I heard someone complain about how it was so stupid how Jones was like freaking out over bugs. I'm like, dude, I'm pretty sure bugs of that, again, category and size would freak most people out in general. I'm sorry, but that's just something that freaks most people out. Especially, again, of that size. These things are massive that I saw. So anyway. So yeah. He's like, oh yeah, there's like this whole place was like based on this water, theme. So he has them place these tiles on the water, and it unlocks a hidden path. Tim tries to escape the Nazis, but they recapture him, and as they're crossing this bridge, him and the guy who now cuffs Tim fall into the water due to the big guy's height and combination of them fighting each other off. And thus, Tim and him are in the water. He steals the key, recuffs the guy to this, like, crate thing that, like, is separated in the water. So he swims up. I'm just gonna assume that guy just drowns in the water. So, like, fuck him, I guess, right? And so, yeah, he gets out and sneaks away. Or at a different section of the cave, anyway. So yes. Meanwhile, Jones gets the other half of the dial from this tomb, but however, the Nazis unfortunately catch up, and thus the dial is complete. But Tim, now at a vantage point, because he like scoops around and upwards, gets the vantage point, drops down. This gives Indiana Jones enough of a time to grab a gun and fire back at some of them Nazis. However, Jones is shot in the upper chest area, so he's a little hurt, but not dead, obviously. But he's captured, though, as the Nazis bring him along, or the main one, Schmidt does. Cause, he's like, he wants to explain stuff through the vintage, like, villain, like, haha, I told you I was right sort of deal. Anyway, Helena and Tim catch up to where they are. Indy tries to play off, the Schmidt by telling him, since he's a German, that he's to try not to be funny, because I guess Germans aren't allowed to be, like, funny or something? I don't know. Anyway. So while that's going on, Helena jumps onto a plane, and Tim starts his own plane. Yes, the young teen knows how to fly a plane. Or, yeah, because he does it, so he figures it out at the very most. At any rate, Jones tries to psych out the Nazi group, or at least the main one, by saying, like, how, the scope of which, how time has changed. Currently, he sees, like, these things, like, shake and rumble, and he thinks of tectonic plates or some sort of, like, phenomena that happens within Earth, and he's like, everything is different from the time, right, if you set a thing, like, say, in the water, at a certain point in time, the likelihood of it still being in the same place is what Indiana Jones is trying to drop up here. The prospect of that being true is virtually non-existent. That there's no way that that this place that they're trying to get to, because the dial like guides them to like the spot via like coordinates or whatever that brings them to this time displacement area, as it were. But I should probably prompt by saying, when they were discovering the tomb, when they searched inside it, they bizarrely find a watch inside the tomb, and Indiana Jones remarks on this, saying how a watch couldn't have possibly been invented back then. This is to indicate that the rest of the movie already happened, that being that the watch was kept and buried, and that's the only thing that was kept as the changes, as it were, maybe one of the few. And perhaps like the war would have just done the rest of the people who died that would die anyway. I don't know how the rest of that works, because time travel opens up that level of can of worms regardless, so there's still that. I get it. Don't trust me, I do get that level of criticism, I do. Because time travel is not an easy thing to write. Never has been, and based on what I've seen recently, probably never will be again. Or for a long time, anyway. Anyway. So yeah, they're starting... Schmidt here starting to freak out, because he kind of... Jones has already gotten his head, and he might even, he's like, But, unfortunately, the plane is far too close for them to really pretty much do anything to this time displacement area. And at first, when they swoop through this, I'll just call it a portal, I guess, the Nazi Schmidt suddenly and abruptly thinks that he's right. He's got it. He's nailed it. He looks at all the gadgets and gizmos. He's like, haha, I told you that I was right. However, it doesn't take too long for the plane itself and the secondary plane which followed them, which has Tim in it and some other guy who's just in there for whatever reason, to like turn off for moments and then come back on, only to find that they're in a bombardment storm of some type of war. And this sort of gets the Schmidt's and everyone else's attention, only to find that when Jones looks out the window and sees how much everything has changed, Jones is the one who correctly points out that indeed he was the one who was right. Well, still wrong, but right. I'll explain what I mean by that, but anyway. We see that this has brought them to a time and place where the inventor was about to build the very dial that they are indeed already have in their possession. And everyone, including him, are, looking at this thing that they don't understand in the sky, most likely. And so we see that this is not going well. But during our plane escapades, Indy and in tow Helena escape through a parachute, and leaving the Nazis because they're still being bombarded. The last remaining of them nosedive into the ground and blow up. And the guy, the time inventor guy, goes to check the bodies, and indeed, you see him literally pick up the Nazis' watch, which is the watch we see from the tomb being picked up here. So that's the watch that was buried, very clearly. So, Indiana Jones, seeing this whole display, is quite mesmerized. This is quite the spectacle for someone who's, invested in history. Like, a historian's dream come true, if anything, to, like, go back to a point in time that you might have even been, obsessed with, perhaps. Any point in time. So he wants to stay, and Helena's like, no, you gotta go back, you gotta preserve all the stuff, and so, yeah. So she's trying to convince the inventor guy, and he's trying to convince the inventor guy a few different things. And it's more so like they're still also trying to convince each other through convincing him, kind of, in a way. So she's seeing that Indiana Jones won't budge. He just wants to stay. Again, this is like a dream come true, And so she's like, I'm sorry, just gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. So she sucker punches him into a knockout, and by the time he wakes up, he's back in the current timeline, and is back in, I believe, his place. And so she inherently, through whatever means, invited his old flame back to him, and his old other pals, visit. At least one of them does, with the two kids. And so Helena sees that the place is getting a little overcrowded now that Jones has reunited with his old flame. And indeed, the Helena ushers everybody out. That's, because, catch-up time is necessary. So that leads our Indiana Jones to reunite with a lovely old kiss to his old relationship. And our closing shot of the movie, as we see that the hat that he always wears on all the adventures, including this one, is on, like, the coat rack, or whatever type of rack it is outside, and him grabbing it. And that was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And now we gotta say, after all the thumbnails I've seen, I'm gonna just ask, is this movie really that bad? I mean, granted, yeah, I get some of the issues. Again, the time travel thing is like, ugh, I get it. Because, yeah, that does open up a can of worms of, like, well, if those guys didn't die at their expected times, like, did that ruin anything else? And did that change anything else? There's all that slew of can of worms that definitely opens up. And I do get that. And it is at the tail end of the movie. So I get how that could ruin, for some people, the entire movie. To a degree. However, I'm also of the rethinking of everything based off of the question I asked earlier. If all of Indiana Jones's relics have powers in them, are we really that off in being that mad at this movie and the previous movie? And that, again, includes myself, because, again, I also criticized the whole alien thing at the time, and I didn't really think much else of it other than, well, aliens, that's like a whole outside concept to Indiana Jones, when I didn't really reflect on that further. But now, in retrospect, thinking back on it now, I'm like, I mean, I'm a little bit less, like, it's complete shit, I guess, in a way. And I guess the other thing to complain about is the runtime, I guess, though, I don't know, I feel like a lot was accomplished in that 2 hours. Excuse me for saying, like, I didn't feel like they dawdled too much in any single thing. So, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Um, Again, and the only other criticism that I would see as valid is, yeah, the Nazis do consistently find them. It's like, yeah, there is that big question of how do they even consistently keep finding our heroes. Outside of that, and the time travel, which again has its own issues in its own right. If we pluck that out temporarily and just look at like the rest of the movie, again, I ask, is this movie that bad? And I'm going to simply answer, no, not really. At least from what I've seen, or saw. This movie seems to, indeed, play off like what I remember of any other Indiana Jones movie, or maybe I'm just misremembering them. Again, I could be completely wrong on that front. Again, it's been a while since I've seen the first three. I don't know. But, I guess I'm just not as, like, bad, I guess, at this point. I don't know. It's like, in terms of a score, I guess I'd give it like a 6 out of 10? Yeah, I know, it's not surprisingly that low. And that's because I don't think, like, the time travel is, like, it doesn't create as much issue as some other movies do. It's like, it seems to me like, at least what they were trying to spell out through that whole mess of the time travel aspect of it, was like, the only thing of consequence, quote unquote, that was brought up was the watch. Again, and I could be wrong, but it seemed like that was the case. We don't see any other consequences, so again, I'm not going to allude to anything that's not in the movie, so that would, because that would be in bad faith. And again, I'm here to be as objective as possible. So, again, the consequences, I go, well, there aren't that many, surprisingly, through the time travel, if at all, or much anyway. Not enough to, like, say this movie's outright bad because of it. I don't think that's fair to the movie at all. And just because the character is playing an older character, I'm not convinced just because they're doing the whole cliche of an older man being a bit tired and all of that stuff. I'm not necessarily even convinced that that isn't something that has to be avoided at all costs. I mean, if that's the story they wanted to tell, I'm over here being like, if you can tell it well enough, go for it, I guess. At this point, in my movie reviewing career... Oh, I'm sorry, I put career like I was serious. Well, I only have one Patreon supporter, so, you know, I wish I had more. That'd be nice. Really, really nice. That would help so much. Anyway, again, I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna say this movie is not as bad as I think a lot of people are playing it out to be. And I think it comes from a place of maybe misremembering the original Indiana Jones movies, or maybe it's from a place of putting too much emphasis on the time travel aspect, or maybe it's, you know, there's a whole slew of potential things that I'm predicting are other people's bigger issues with this movie. And I'm gonna say, it's not that bad. I would say, you know, it's alright. 6 out of 10. There's a few issues, but more positive than negative, actually. So yeah, that's my review, and I'm going to stick to it. That's my review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you ended up enjoying my full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out the links in the description. The first will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second, third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel, and fourth to my Discord server you can join, collab, and all that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.